You are living in the most disruptive time in human history. Given the advances in AI and biotechnology, you might have to contend with the possibility of human immortality. It's certainly not a guarantee, but advances in health span, anti-aging, and cellular biology make it one of the most important conversations of our time. Investments and decisions made now will reverberate for generations to come. Here to talk about the state of affairs is Dr. Bill Green. You, as an investor, have a very difficult job. And as an investor, you have to bet against the consensus and be right. So what I want to know is, what is it that you really believe in your specialty of biotech that you're willing to bet big on?
Fundamentally, we're here to invest in people and companies and ideas that are going to lead to real breakthrough therapeutics that can treat, delay, and even prevent diseases of aging. More broadly, in biotech, we're here to create the next generation of therapies that are safer, more effective, and more tailored to the actual problem that individuals have as opposed to really broad populations. And that's exciting.
How far are we going to be able to push it? So if we can slow down aging, I'm sure we can both agree on that. The question becomes, can we stop aging? Can we reverse it?
The short answer is absolutely. We know we can. In worms, sometimes in mice. Can we do it in humans? At the level of our cells, yes. Can we do it at the level of our whole body? Maybe. The question is, do we want to? What we really want to do is live our lives in health with vitality and not spend increasing portions of our lives debilitated by chronic disease. That's what most people really think about. They don't necessarily want to live forever, but they definitely want to live healthy. I do. Most of us do. And that absolutely has a role to play with the biology of aging, with slowing down the processes by which aging, if you will, goes wrong.
I'll be very eager to have the debate about whether we should want to or actually live forever. But first I want to know, so given that you're looking at this, there's a real shot that we're going to be able to, we know we can reverse it in a cell, but there's a shot that we might be able to, as we get more breakthroughs, do that at the level of the whole body. What is the bet? As you look at this as an investor, there's going to be a few things on the table that you think, okay, it's maybe one of these, and I'll make this number up, but maybe one of these 5 things. What is that small handful of things that you think have a real shot to be a blockbuster?
Some of what really leads to chronic disease and degenerative disease is fibrosis. It literally, instead of being pliable and resilient, our tissues can get fibrotic and connective tissue builds up and actually not only reduces the ability to move, but actually reduces the function. So think about your heart, which has to beat every second. If it becomes fibrosed, it can't expand, it can't relax, it can't beat strongly. And that's one of the causes of heart failure. If we could actually, and we've thought that fibrotic process is a one-way street. Once it starts, you maybe can slow it down, but you could never stop it or reverse it. If we could reverse fibrosis, we could unlock a lot of resilience in our organs and tissues, and that could actually reverse some of the diseases of aging.
Is there anything that we see in the research that's promising? Like, is somebody actually working on this?
Lots of companies are working on it. And
Connor Leahy is one of the world's leading minds in artificial intelligence. He is a hacker who sees the rise of AI as an existential threat to humanity. He dedicates his life to make sure its success doesn't spell our doom.
There will be intelligent creatures on this planet that are not human. This is not normal. And there will be no going back. And if we don't control them, then the future will belong to them, not to us.
Leahy is the CEO of Conjecture AI, a startup that tries to understand how AI systems think with the aim of aligning them to human values. He speaks to the interview about why he believes the end is near and explains how he's trying to stop it. And Connor Leahy joins us now on the interview. He's the CEO of Conjecture. He's in our London studio. Good to see you there. Good to have you on the program, Connor. You're something of an AI guru, and you're also one of those voices saying we need to be very, very careful right now. And a lot of people don't quite have the knowledge or they don't quite have the vocabulary or the deeper understanding as to why they should be worried. They just feel some sort of sense of doom, but they can't quite map it out. So maybe you can help us along that path. Why should we be worried about AGI? And tell me the difference between AGI and what is widely perceived as AI right now.
So I'll answer the second question first, just to get some definitions out of the way.
Sure.
The truth is that there's really no true definition of the word AGI, and people use it to mean all kinds of different things. When I talk about the word AGI, usually what I mean by this is AI systems or computer systems that are more capable than humans at all tasks that they could do. So this involves, any scientific task, programming, remote work, science, business, politics, anything. And these are systems that do not currently exist, but are actively attempting to be built. There are many people working on building those systems, and many experts believe these systems are close. And as for why these systems are going to be a problem, well, I actually think that a lot of people have the right intuition here. The intuition here is just, well, if you build something that is more competent than you, it's smarter than you, and all the people you know and all the people in the world, it is better at business, politics, manipulation, deception, science, weapons development, everything, and you don't control those things, which we currently do not know how to do, well, why would you expect that to go well?
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit about the debate about whether we should be looking for life in the universe beyond our solar system. Stephen Hawking said, be careful, look at the history of the world. Anytime you sort of invite a stronger power, more competent power, they might come and destroy you. But then the counter to that is that you're mapping human behavior, human desires, passions, needs, wants onto this thing. Is this natural to do and fair to do because humans created it? Humans created the parameters for it.
So it's actually worse than that, in that it's really important to understand that when we talk about AI, it's easy to imagine it to be software. And the way software generally works, it is written by a programmer. They write code which tells the computer what to do, step by step. This is not how AI works. AI is more like organic. It is more like it is grown. You use these big supercomputers to take a bunch of data and grow a program that can solve the problems in the data. Now, this program does not look like something written by humans. It's not code. It's not lines of instructions. It's more like a huge pile of billions and billions of numbers. And we know if we can run all these numbers, if we execute these numbers, they can do really amazing things. But no one knows why. So it's way more like dealing with a biological thing. Like if you look at like a bacterium or something, and the bacteria can do some crazy things, and we don't really know why. And this is kind of how our AIs are. So the question is less, will humans impart emotions into these systems? We don't know how to do that. It's more, if you build systems, if you grow bacteria who are designed to solve problems, to solve games, to make money or whatever, what kind of things will you grow? And by default, you're going to grow things that are good at solving problems, at gaining power, at tricking people, at building things and so on, because this is what we want.
you reverse engineered GPT-2 at the age of 24, which was a few years ago. That's part of the legend. I mean, that's part of the credentialing of you before they say, well, this guy's saying we're in big trouble. They say, well, by the way, you know, he knows what he's talking about because technically he knows what he's doing. Tell me.
Yeah.
All right, we have more changes unfolding in the world of geopolitics. Changes that have the Yemen government coming out over the weekend and warning the United States and its allies that they need to back off and stop the bombing of its land, or you'll face one of the worst attacks that you've seen in recent history, saying their Houthis know where the cables are for your digital infrastructure, how they pass right through our backyard, they said, right through the Red Sea, and they're not afraid to cut them. But before we get started, thank you for liking and sharing these videos. It really helps me out. And make sure to subscribe to the channel to continue receiving these regular updates. Also, don't forget to check out our new daily show over on the Notify America YouTube channel. The link's in the description. How the Houthis could get revenge on the US for airstrikes by cutting a fifth of the world's internet. Yemen's government warns of threat to world's digital infrastructure. That's the headline. And look, you hear about this kind of thing like once a year or every other year. Whenever a conflict seems to pop up, people start warning about these like massive underwater fiber optic cables being cut. But this time, it's not just speculation. This time, the Yemen government came out and is openly warning the world, tell the United States to back off, or the Houthis will cut the lines. Obviously, not only affecting the US, but affecting a fifth of the world's internet. Think of like the consequences of that, though, like the type of flash crash possibly, or prolonged maybe crash that you'd see in markets if 20% of the world's digital infrastructure went offline. Now, just for some context, before we look at this, as they gave specifics on how they're capable of doing this, by the way, but just for some context, here's what we're talking about. These undersea fiber optic cables that stretch around the world, here's what they look like. A simple 1 to 2 inch cable like this is what maintains our global digital infrastructure, folks. And here's the problem. It's not like power lines here in the States when a storm comes and knocks down a telephone pole where it would only affect one tiny area, one block, or a tiny portion of a community. Instead, if what Yemen is warning about comes to pass, we're talking 17% of the world's digital infrastructure immediately taken offline. All U.S. military bases and substations in the Middle East go dark instantly. No warning, no time to prepare. U.S. service people over there would be sitting ducks, completely cut off. And what makes it even scarier is the Houthis appear to know what they're doing. Their military did their due diligence, apparently, and released this map with the warning showing how the cables that run through the Red Sea, right through their backyard, how they know that they aren't just these secondary or tertiary cables. They could have posted pictures of all the cables, but they didn't. They focused on one of only a handful of these fiber optic lines, core cables, that happen to connect entire continents to the grid. For example, here's all the underwater cable, right? Many of these that you see on this map are secondary or tertiary lines connecting parts of countries. Less significant, less damage, but then there are the core cables that connect not just countries, but entire continents, which happens to be what runs right through the Red Sea, right through Yemen's backyard. Basically, it turns out they're in one of the most strategically vital locations to cause maximum damage if they want to. And they just delivered a warning to the Biden administration, back the hell off. Stop bombing us or we'll do it. Here's what they say, quote, Iranian-backed Houthi militants in Yemen could try to sabotage internet cables in the Red Sea carrying nearly 1/5 of the world's web traffic, according to a spate of new warnings. Yemen's government warned that the Red Sea is one of the 3 most important meeting points for cables on the globe, and that the Houthis pose a serious threat to one of the most important digital infrastructures in the world. It came after a Houthi social media channel published a map showing the routes of various cables through the Red Sea, Gulf of Aden, and the Arabian Sea. So this official Houthi account posted this map, right, but was also accompanied, they say, with this ominous message saying this, quote, "It seems that Yemen is in a strategic location as internet lines that connect entire continents, not only countries, pass near it." Now, we're going to look at the likelihood of them doing this in a minute, because that's what some people are saying, that they aren't sophisticated enough technologically to actually pull this off, to reach the cables. Well, it turns out they are. But just to show you who we're dealing with, the account that posted that message is an official Houthi account. It's the same account, in fact, that posted this video a month ago telling the world they will not be standing idly by as the US attacks its country. Watch this. So yes, they are a real military. They're not the most sophisticated military in the world, but they've managed to completely shut down the Red Sea, stop all maritime shipping through the Suez Canal, something that Western leaders said they wouldn't be able to do. So maybe, just maybe, it's worth listening for a change to what they're saying. Now they go on and write, quote, "It's
This episode and others like it are brought to you by the generous support of my patrons on Patreon. If you'd like to help support this channel, join our growing Discord server, and get early access to every video, consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/secondthought. Throughout the well-worn pages of history, empires have risen, grown to prominence, and collapsed into the mist of time. The Roman Empire, stretching from the sweltering sands of Africa to the murky woods of northern England. The British Empire and her dominance of the Seven Seas. Radio Shack. All of these and more have become the stuff of legend, each with their own stories of success, expansion, and ultimately collapse, unable to bear the weight of their inherent contradictions. But are all empires destined to meet this fate? And the question on everyone's mind, probably because it's the title of this video, are we living through the end of an empire? In this episode, we'll take a look at the precarious position of the United States and consider some historic parallels to assess whether the US is really in decline. All right, here we go. I'm ready. Nope, that's terrible. All right, I'm ready. Shouldn't. Rome. Or are we doing this as 2 takes? Okay, here we go. I'm ready. Rome. The empire all other empires aspire to be. From their breathtaking architecture, to their lavish feasts, to their penchant for feeding people they don't like to wild animals, Rome is truly the shining example of what other nations can only hope to accomplish. We can't really talk about empires or empires in decline without talking about the Roman one. And it just so happens that Americans, from politicians to far-right history YouTubers, love to compare the US to Rome. So, is there something to this comparison? Is the US the new Rome? In a lovely bit of cosmic irony, the first book of Edward Gibbon's ambitious 6-volume work, The History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, was published in 1776, on the eve of the birth of a new empire. One that would go on to become arguably the most powerful in history. In some ways, the United States and the Roman Empire do have a lot in common.
Behold, dear Petronius, my new Rome.
An insatiable desire for expansion, extreme inequality, a globe-spanning network of influence, a penchant for chattel slavery, military dominance, and decadent displays of wealth. There have been countless books, essays, political diatribes, and social media posts earnestly comparing the United States to Rome, and often for good reason. Both empires were bogged down in endless wars, both displayed a shocking level of wealth inequality, both suffered economic crises that commentators in both eras were certain would spell the final end of the golden age of civilization. And if we're being honest, both had about the same response to disease outbreaks, which is to say those in power let a whole lot of people die and isolated themselves as best they could. But we should also note that a lot of the people making these comparisons are only doing it because they have this weird thing about mythologizing the United States. It's a very young country, comparatively speaking, so what better way to afford it a little extra grandeur than giving ourselves the title of the New Rome, the shining city on a hill, the glorious republic that commands the world itself. That fits very nicely into the whole manifest destiny, American exceptionalism thing. We'll get back to that towards the end of the video. But first, we need to address what the end of an empire actually looks like. I'm sure you've heard the phrase, the fall of Rome. Despite the popularity of the phrase, most academics have moved on from the term fall when talking about the Roman Empire. The consensus now is that it wasn't any single inflection point that triggered a dramatic collapse, but an agonizing, generations-long slide into a decreased standing in the world. There wasn't one single point where we could say Rome was an empire yesterday and today it's a failed project. The real world doesn't work like that. There were certainly some instances one could point to as chapter markers near the end of the story. For example, around the year 476, there wasn't really an emperor claiming the vast swaths of land the empire had once held with an iron fist. But if we're looking for a Marvel-esque announcement that Rome has fallen, we're not gonna find one. What we can trace, and it's easier to do so in retrospect, is a series of minor failures that go unaddressed. Crumbling infrastructure due to lack of investment, rampant corruption, severe inequality, dwindling trust in institutions or leadership, humiliating military defeat, or endless conflict sapping resources. These all add up to a very real challenge to the structure of an empire. To take the Roman example, the city of Rome itself had been sacked multiple times, but what really did the city in was when the supply chain failed. State-subsidized grain shipments on state-subsidized ships tied up at state-subsidized docks. Eventually, as the state was less able or willing to maintain these mundane but crucial projects, things sort of just fell apart over time. It's never one big collapse, it's death by 1,000 cuts. Countless seemingly insignificant failures that together add up to an inability to function. A useful way to think about this can be found in Isaac Asimov's Foundation trilogy, which is now actually a really good show if you're into sci-fi. Much like Harry Seldon prophesied a series of crises along the path of the Empire's long and painful collapse, so too can we take a step back and see a handful of big red dots on the timeline of American decline. I don't want to spoil the show, but suffice it to say that it has a really good understanding of the scale we're talking about when looking at the process of decline. It's not a quick and dramatic collapse. These things take decades or even centuries, but the cracks are already there. And every once in a while, a pillar buckles. The Great Depression, the Red Scares and McCarthyist pogroms, 9/11, the 2008 financial crash and Great Recession, COVID, and now the handful of crises that have been simmering for decades and are coming to a head, the climate crisis and the collapse of US imperial control of the periphery. We're losing ground economically, militarily, and geopolitically to China. The US regime's steadfast support for the genocide of the Palestinian people has ensured no country in the third world will ever believe our rhetoric about self-determination and freedom again. Just like that, an entire generation of Americans disabused of the myth that we're the good guys. And this is where the usual Western analysis begins to fail. A lot of people make the mistake of attributing crises of empire to the failures or excesses of individual leaders or people or groups with influence. It's always the other team that's making things go wrong. It's Trump on immigration and LGBT rights. It's Biden on funding endless proxy wars. While megalomaniacs or senile old warmongers can certainly make things worse, the underlying logic of the system in which they operate is the determining factor in how the crises they lead us through are handled. Take COVID, for example.
I know that we will achieve victory and quickly return to the path of exceptional health, safety, and prosperity for all of our citizens. We have to get back to work. Our people want to work. They want to go back. They have to go back.
Because the United States follows a capitalist economic philosophy, the key consideration during the pandemic was keeping the gears of the market turning, regardless of the human toll. The prime directive of capitalism is the accumulation of capital, and if that means we have to sacrifice low-paid workers on the altar of profit, so be it. There was no meaningful difference between Trump and Biden on this issue, despite the two leaders being characterized as polar opposites by the media class. If you look beneath the aesthetic differences between the two major parties, if you ignore the bombastic rhetoric and empty posturing on social issues and look strictly at the economic base of the system we live under, it's clear that every single great man one could point to is beholden to the same interests, and is therefore more of a byproduct of the system than a leader that changes it. Okay, so if it's not the leaders, then what makes the difference between empires that endure and empires that fall? Every nation and empire in history has faced challenges. Nothing exists in a vacuum. So what sets apart an empire that meets these challenges and one that's on the way out? In a nutshell, resilience. The ability of the system to react to, adapt to, and overcome the challenges they're presented with. Rebuilding key infrastructure after a natural disaster. Reassessing the system after an economic crisis to make sure it doesn't happen again. Taking swift action to protect people from a major disease outbreak. You can probably see where I'm going with all this. Take infrastructure. Flint, Michigan still has undrinkable water, despite the government finally promising to replace the water lines. Much of New Orleans is still destroyed or underwater 18 years after Hurricane Katrina. We have trains going off the rails at a rate of 4.8 derailments per day, many of those trains carrying toxic chemicals, as we saw firsthand when we went to East Palestine, Ohio earlier this year. The United States is notorious for letting its infrastructure fail and never repairing it. When it comes to economic disasters, things aren't any better. In the wake of the 07-08 financial crash and the recession that followed, nearly 10 million Americans lost their homes. Those homes were snatched up by institutional investors like BlackRock, and most of them are still held hostage on the rental market today. Did the government do anything about the conditions that led up to this crisis? Not really. They gave a couple people a slap on the wrist, but the vast majority of the criminal executives that profited from the real estate bubble and swindled the American people got off scot-free. And now, experts are saying it kinda looks like there's another bubble brewing. Most Americans are worse off now than they were in 2007. They haven't recovered. And if there is another crash, things will get even worse for even more people. Then, of course, there's COVID. Was there an answer to curbing the death toll of the pandemic? Yes. Did American leadership know what it was? Yes. Did they follow the science and prevent those deaths? No, they did not. In fact, they did the opposite, waxing poetic about the importance of the market and how valued our frontline workers are. And then they moved on.
Creative work online has been broadly labeled content. Content is a state of mind. I think the widespread embrace of the word content actually means something. And it's not great. This episode is brought to you by Nebula, where right now you can watch an exclusive bonus video I made in which I rank every hairstyle Tom Cruise has had in all of his movies. You may have thought that was just a joke in the last episode, but no, it's real. I made it, and it's out now.
The world is changed. I feel it in the earth. I smell it in the air. Something is coming. A humble man, yet filled with a godlike rage that can only be slaked on the field of online film commentary.
Emma. It's time.
You don't mean.
That's right. It's happening. Alert the masses.
The Horn of Vulcan.
Must be the content episode.
Hello and welcome to today's episode. Heads up, this one is going to be a little different than usual. I mean, so was last episode about AI filmmaking, but this time we are taking that baton and running farther into uncharted territory. See, this is a video that I have been threatening to make for years. A topic that I have been stewing over for a very long time, and finally, the time has come. Over the past 15 years or so, a new word has become a part of our vocabulary. Well, it's technically a word that already existed, but it has found a new meaning. As the internet, particularly YouTube, has allowed people to make careers by independently producing and releasing creative work online, that work has been broadly labeled content.
Talking about making content.
Create more content.
Consistently post content.
That quality content.
Snippet-worthy content.
Your content.
Content.
Content. Content.
Content.
Content. Content.
Content.
Content.
Content. Content.
Content. Content.
And more recently, the definition of the word has expanded. Now, content doesn't just apply to internet media made by independent creators. Now, it applies to traditional media like movies and TV as well.
Our great content is what drives our numbers.
Even more content.
More original content, great content.
Increasing the amount of content for kids, content for families, nonfiction content, bouquet of content, array of content.
Anyone who's ever met me in person or follows me on Twitter knows that I am not a huge fan of this word. And I realize that this might sound sort of crazy. After all, aren't I a content creator? Don't I literally make content for a living? What the hell am I talking about? This is all true. I do technically make content, which does technically make me a content creator. But I don't like saying that. I have spent years complaining about this to friends who mostly don't care. While stuck on that island, I tried to write a whole book on the subject, except I was writing it in the sand and then the tide came in and washed it all away. And other Patrick, for all his many flaws, felt the same way and even had this important line in his theme song. So yeah, we are here today to talk about a word. I am fully aware that this is a stupid problem. It doesn't really matter. Why am I making such a big deal about it? Well, when it comes to content, it's not like I just hate the sound of the